She didn't sell furniture. She didn't sell jewelry. She didn't sell paintings or silverware or any of the things people sell when grief makes them careless. She sold 217 books that belonged to my 10-year-old daughter. And she used the money to buy a popcorn machine. Before this story goes any further, take 1 second to subscribe. Because what happened over the next 9 days is the kind of quiet, careful, absolutely devastating thing that happens when the wrong person underestimates a librarian. My name is Danielle. I'm 34. I work in an archive. I spend my days handling documents that outlive the people who wrote them. And on a cold Thursday afternoon in March, I drove 2 hours through the Vermont mountains to pick up a book my daughter had been asking about all week. And found 217 empty shelves. The room still smelled like it always had. Paper, old leather, the faint sweetness of beeswax polish. But the smell had nowhere to go now. Nothing left to settle on. Just air. My daughter Ivy was still in the car. 10 years old. Finishing a turkey sandwich because I'd told her to wait while I grabbed something quickly. I didn't grab anything. There was nothing left to grab. To understand what was stolen, you need to understand who built it. Cordelia and Boyd was my great-grandmother. She was the first woman in our family to attend college. Wellesley, class of 1956, English literature. The last Boyd who believed that books were not decorations. They were not investments. They were not clutter. They were sacred. When she sold the family goldsmith business in 1981, she didn't buy real estate or stocks or a vacation home. She bought books. First editions of children's literature. Arthur Rackham illustrations. Caldecott Medal winners from the 1930s. A Kelmscott Chaucer printed in 1896 on handmade linen paper. 3 handwritten letters from Beatrix Potter, actual letters, in her actual hand, discussing the illustrations for the tale of Jemima Puddleduck. 217 items, total. Catalogued. Appraised. Shelved in the East Wing Library of the Boyd family house in Whitfield, Vermont. And in 2008, when Cordelia was 81, she did something that would matter enormously 16 years later. She established a foundation. The Cordelia Boyd Heritage Library Foundation. A 501(c)(3). Federally registered. Filed with the Vermont Secretary of State. The books were formally transferred into the foundation's ownership and placed on what's called a permanent loan, meaning they stayed inside the family house, and in exchange, the house received a conditional tax exemption. $30,000 a year in property taxes. Gone. Because the books were there. The agreement had one condition. The books stay unsold. Passed to the next direct line descendant. And in 2020, 2 years before she died, Cordelia added one final amendment. She named my daughter Ivy as the sole beneficiary. Ivy was 6 years old. Cordelia sat her in the mahogany reading chair by the south window, opened a green leather copy of The Wind in the Willows, 1908 printing, Arthur Rackham illustrations, gilt-stamped spine, and said, "These are yours now, sweetheart." On the inside front cover of every single book in that library, Cordelia had placed her bookplate. Hand-engraved Art Nouveau design. And underneath, in her own handwriting, a single line. For Ivy, who will keep them safe. Ivy touched that line every time she opened a book. Every single time. It was her ritual. She never skipped it. My mother had been watching that collection for over a year. It started with a comment at Thanksgiving, November 2024, while Ivy sat 3 chairs away eating cranberry sauce with a fork. Those books are just collecting dust in that creepy old room. I remember the exact moment. Because Ivy looked up from her plate, held my mother's gaze for 2 full seconds, and then went quietly back to eating. 9 years old. And she already knew exactly what my mother was doing. After Thanksgiving, the comments came monthly. Soft. Reasonable. Relentless. Honey, have you thought about what to do with all those old books? Vanessa's boys would love that library room. They could turn it into a playroom. Your father's knees can't handle the East Wing stairs anymore. Maybe we should renovate. I gave the same answer every time. They're not mine, Mom. They belong to Ivy. And my mother always gave the same smile. The tight one. The one that meant she'd heard me and decided I was wrong. What I didn't understand then, what I wish I had understood sooner, was that her obsession with those books was never really about the books at all. It was about Cordelia. 14 years earlier, Cordelia had rewritten her will. She'd skipped my mother entirely, skipped my father, left the estate, the house, the foundation, the library, directly to me. And after me, to Ivy. My mother had married into the Boyd family at 22. She'd raised 2 daughters in that house, hosted 31 Christmases, cooked every holiday meal in that kitchen. And Cordelia's will said, in the gentlest legal language money could buy, that Margaret Boyd was not considered a real Boyd. That wound never healed. It just grew teeth. Every Saturday, I drove Ivy 40 minutes from our apartment in Brattleboro to the family house in Whitfield. She had a ritual. She would walk straight through the front door without greeting anyone, push open the library door with her hip, and go directly to the 3rd shelf on the south wall. That's where the green leather wind in the Willows lived. She would lift it with both hands, always both hands, even though it weighed less than a pound, carry it to the mahogany reading chair, and sit down. Her feet dangled 6 inches off the floor. She'd open the cover, find the bookplate, and trace Cordelia's handwriting with one finger. For Ivy, who will keep them safe. Then, and only then, she would begin to read. Same book. Same chair. Same ritual. Every Saturday for 3 years. One afternoon, she told me the book smelled like rain and old wood. I told her that was the binding adhesive deteriorating and the foxing on the end papers. She said she preferred her version. I said that was fair. The Whitfield Research Library runs a staff retreat every March. 9 days near Lake Willoughby in Vermont's Northeast Kingdom. I'd attended every year since my 2nd year as head archivist. This year, I brought Ivy. She packed 4 paperbacks, a sketchbook, and a pencil case with pencils sharpened to identical points. She did not bring any of Cordelia's books. She never did. You visit the books, Cordelia had taught her. You don't relocate them. You are the one who travels. My mother offered to watch the house while we were gone. Water the plants. Bring in the mail. Make sure the furnace pilot stayed lit. I said that would be wonderful. The night we left, she texted me. Have fun, sweetie. We've got things handled here. I read it 3 times sitting on a fallen log beside the lake, watching Ivy roast a marshmallow that was already past saving. Something about the phrasing nagged at me. Things handled. Not the house looks fine. Not everything's good. Things handled. Like a task list with a check mark. Like a job that was finished. I told myself I was overanalyzing a text message. I was wrong. We drove home 9 days later. 2 hours through the Green Mountains. Ivy fell asleep somewhere past the Massachusetts border, her sketchbook open on her lap, filled with birds she'd spotted from the dock. I told her we'd stop at the family house on the way back so she could pick up the green leather wind in the Willows for bedtime reading. She said, okay, without looking up from a sketch of a common loon she was still shading. When we pulled into the driveway at 4:15 that Thursday afternoon, the porch light was on. My parents' car was not in the driveway. 5 or 6 days of mail stacked against the front door. I used the spare key under the 3rd flagstone, the one Cordelia placed there in 1974, the one no one had ever moved, and let myself in. The house was clean. Unusually clean. Vacuum tracks on the hallway runner, fresh and parallel. A vanilla-scented candle burning on the kitchen counter. The candle my mother only lights when she's trying to mask another smell. I walked toward the east wing. The hallway is 11 steps. I know because I've been counting them since I was 4 years old. The library door was open. The overhead fluorescent was on. Cordelia had insisted on table lamps only. Overhead light degrades bindings over decades. Someone had flipped the switch and walked away from it. I stepped inside. The room smelled like dust and vanilla. Not paper. Not leather. Not beeswax polish. The shelves were empty. I counted them. I don't know why that was my first instinct, but it was, the archivist in me, needing to quantify before I could grieve. Shelf A1 through L17. 217 slots. Every one of them bare. Dust outlines where the spines had been. Faint rectangles of darker wood, preserved by decades of shade, marking where each book had lived. The mahogany reading chair sat by the south window, exactly where it had always been. But the light falling across its cushion looked wrong. Too bright. Too uninterrupted. Nothing left to break the glare. On the seat cushion was a folded invoice. Howerin and Sons Rare Books, Manhattan. Dated 5 days earlier. Total, $165,000. Seller, Richard Boyd. My father had initialed every page. My mother had witnessed on page 4. The transaction included full photographic documentation, provenance verification, and a certified check deposited into their joint savings account. $165,000. For 217 books that did not belong to them. I heard small footsteps on the hardwood behind me. Ivy had come in from the car. She stood in the doorway. She looked past me at the shelves the way you look at a room in a dream, recognizing the shape of it, but not the emptiness. I stepped sideways to block her view. Honey, go back to the car, please. She didn't move. Her eyes found the third shelf on the south wall. The slot where the green leather wind in the Willows had lived for 11 years. Then she turned around and walked back down the hallway. She didn't cry. She didn't ask a single question. 10 years old. And she understood everything before I said a word. My parents came home at 7 that evening carrying a spa bag, a bottle of wine, and wide smiles that collapsed the moment they saw me sitting at the kitchen table with the invoice under my palm. My mother set her bag on the counter and tilted her head, the way she does when she's about to explain something she considers too obvious for discussion. Oh, sweetie. They were just collecting dust in that creepy old room. Brent found such a nice dealer in New York. We did everyone a favor. She said it with the calm satisfaction of a woman who believed she'd solved a problem nobody else had the courage to address. Vanessa's boys are going to have the most incredible home theater. We even got a popcorn machine, the professional kind. Like at a real cinema. My father uncorked the wine. Honey, those books weren't doing anyone any good just sitting in there. I looked at him. Did you read the inscription inside any of them? My mother waved her hand. Cordelia's little notes. Sweetie, she's been gone 3 years. It's time to live in the present. I looked at the wine glass. I looked at the spa bag. I looked at my mother's new gold earrings. Then I stood up. Thank you for dinner. I walked to the living room, picked up Ivy's jacket, and said quietly, let's go, honey. We drove home in the dark. I did not raise my voice. I did not slam the door. I closed it the way you close a book you intend to come back to. Somewhere around the second exit ramp, Ivy woke up and rubbed her eyes. Mom, did Grandma sell them? Yes, honey. 4 minutes of silence. I watched the dashboard clock because it was the only light in the car. Then, softly, did she sell the green one? I think so. But I'm going to find them. All of them. All of them. All of them. She turned toward the window and pressed her forehead against the glass. One word came back to me in the dark. Just one word. Okay. I have signed preservation grants worth 6 figures. I have signed sympathy cards at 3 funerals where I meant every word. I have never held a single syllable as heavy as that one. Okay. It carried everything she couldn't say at 10 years old. Trust, and grief, and a question she was too proud to ask out loud. Can you really bring them back? I drove the remaining 30 miles in silence, one hand on the wheel, the other resting on the manila folder I'd pulled from the filing cabinet before leaving the house. My mother hadn't noticed me take it. She'd been too busy describing the popcorn machine's butterwarming feature. 3 in the morning. Ivy asleep down the hall. Kitchen table covered in documents. I had the foundation charter open on my laptop. Next to it, a printout of IRS publication 561. Next to that, the Howerin and Sons website, a photograph of David Howerin standing before a wall of calfskin spines with the expression of a man who has spent 40 years handling objects that outlive their owners. I opened the permanent loan deed. 22 pages. 3 signatures. Filed with the Vermont Secretary of State in January 2010. I turned to Section 7. It was titled, Recapture. Any unauthorized disposition of the collection by any party other than the named beneficiary shall constitute a recapture event, triggering full-back tax assessment for all years of conditional exemption with statutory interest and a 75% penalty. I read it twice. Then a third time. Then I composed an email to Evelyn Marsh, the Foundation's chair. Cordelia's closest friend for 42 years. Subject line: Permanent loan breach. Call me at 7. I hit send at 3:19 in the morning and did not sleep for the rest of the night. Evelyn called at 6:58. She did not say good morning. She said, "Danielle, what happened?" I told her in under 4 minutes. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for exactly 6 seconds. Then she said, "Pull up section 7. I already have it open." "Good. Read it to me." I read it the way I read everything, evenly, without emphasis, letting the language carry its own weight. When I finished, Evelyn spoke. "Your parents owe the IRS approximately $412,000. Back taxes from 2010 through today, plus statutory interest, plus the 75% penalty for unauthorized disposition of conditionally exempt property. That's the federal number." She paused. On the state side, they lose the conditional exemption going forward. That's another $30,000 a year in property taxes, assessed at full market value. Because the exemption was tied to the books being in the house. The books are no longer in the house. Another pause. The IRS will place a federal tax lien on the property for the full amount owed. Between the lien, the back taxes, and the new annual assessment, keeping the house becomes financially impossible. They'll have to sell it. I wrote everything down on a yellow legal pad. Not on my laptop. Paper doesn't crash, and paper doesn't sync to a cloud my mother might access through my father's shared account. Evelyn added one final thing. The books are foundation property. We have first right of clawback under Section 9. If Howerin cooperates, he refunds and returns. If he doesn't, Nathan files in federal court by Friday. I picked up my phone. $412,000 of dust. At 9:14 that morning, I called David Howerin from the parking lot of the Whitfield Library. He picked up on the second ring. His voice was measured, unhurried. The voice of a man who has spent 40 years handling objects worth more than automobiles and has learned never to sound surprised. "Mr. Howerin, my name is Danielle Boyd. I'm the vice chair of the Cordelia Boyd Heritage Library Foundation. You recently purchased 217 items from my parents." A brief pause. "Yes. We completed the transaction in person at the family residence last Tuesday. Have any been resold?" "Not yet. We catalog before listing. Standard practice for a collection of this quality." "Mr. Howerin, those items are on permanent loan from a 501(c)(3) foundation. They are foundation property, not personal assets. Section 7 of the permanent loan deed triggers a clawback provision at an authorized disposition. I'm formally requesting return." Silence. 4 seconds. "Ms. Boyd, I'd like to see that deed. I'll be in Manhattan by 6 this evening with the original." Another pause. 2 seconds. "Drive safely." I hung up and sat in the parking lot with the engine running. 14 years of handling irreplaceable documents teaches you something useful. The most important phone call of your life should sound exactly like every other phone call you've ever made. No tremor. No urgency. State the facts. Name the mechanism. Offer the evidence. Let the other person do the unraveling. I wasn't going to leave Ivy in Brattleboro while I drove to Manhattan. She was coming with me. She was going to see her books. And she was going to watch her mother get them back. 4 hours and 40 minutes on Interstate 91 South. Ivy sat in the back seat with a library paperback. The permanent loan deed rode on the passenger seat in a manila envelope. 22 pages that weighed less than a sandwich and more than anything else in the car. Somewhere past the Massachusetts border, Ivy looked up. "Mom, what's clawback?" "It's when something goes back to its real owner." "Like dogs." "Sometimes like dogs." She considered this. Then, "Mom, why didn't you tell Grandma about the foundation before she sold them? Like, warn her." I took a slow breath. Because I thought that if I never said it out loud, she'd never do anything that made me have to. A pause. That's not very smart. No, honey. It wasn't. That was the first time in her life my daughter told me I wasn't smart. And the first time I agreed with her. Howerin and Sons occupied the second floor of a narrow brownstone on East 61st Street. Mahogany panels. Brass reading lamps. Gallery lighting angled to flatter leather spines. David Howerin met us at the door. He looked at Ivy. She's welcome, I said. She's the beneficiary. He nodded once and led us downstairs to the cataloging room. Climate controlled. 68 degrees. 45% humidity. I knew without asking. Because those are the numbers every rare book professional carries in their head the way paramedics carry blood pressure ranges. 217 books were arranged across 5 long tables, each with a yellow sticky note in Howerin's careful hand. Ivy found it on table 3. The green leather wind in the Willows. She picked it up with both hands, always both hands, and opened it to page 47. Mom, my pencil mark is still here. 18 months ago, she'd made a tiny mark in the margin. The spot where Mole first meets Rat by the riverbank. Howerin, standing 2 feet behind her, said quietly, "Yes. I noticed that when we were cataloging. I left it." Ivy turned to the front cover. Found the bookplate. Traced the handwriting with her finger. For Ivy, who will keep them safe. She closed the book and pressed it against her chest with both arms. She didn't ask if she could take it. She just held it. Howerin sat across from me at the cataloging table, reading the deed with his glasses on. 11 minutes. Neither of us spoke. When he finished, he removed his glasses and set them beside the document. Ms. Boyd, I purchased stolen foundation property. Not stolen, I said. Sold by people who didn't legally own it. There's a difference for you. There isn't one for my parents. He stood and walked to his filing cabinet. He pulled out the purchase contract. 4 pages. And on page 3, in each Polaroid photograph taken to document items valued above $5,000, visible in the lower left corner of every open front cover. Cordelia's bookplate. For Ivy, who will keep them safe. Photographed. Documented. Sitting in Howerin's professional records. He had purchased 217 books with visible proof of their ownership on the front page of every single one. He slid the entire file across the table with both hands. I'll hold the collection here for 14 days while you file. Make it 21, I said. I want the IRS to issue the subpoena before shipment. Chain of custody needs to stay unbroken. He looked at me the way one archivist looks at another when they realize they've been speaking the same language all along. Smart, he said. I drove home that night with 3 centimeters of paper on the passenger seat and a sleeping 10-year-old who, somewhere around the Connecticut border, whispered the word mine without opening her eyes. The voicemail started the next morning. 7:42, Vanessa. Danny. Mom called me sobbing. Whatever you're planning, stop it. Tyler is so excited about the theater room. He is a child. You're going to ruin Christmas over a bunch of old books. 8:14, my mother. Honey, I know you're upset. But we need to talk about this like adults. Don't make it bigger than it is. 9:01, a text from Brent. No punctuation. No period. Just a judgment dressed up as an observation. I forwarded all 3 to Evelyn. She replied in 40 seconds. Document everything. Don't engage. Friday at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, Nathan Pell, Cordelia's lawyer for 11 years, the man who had argued with her over commas at midnight and lost every single time, hand-delivered 2 certified envelopes to my parents' house. One was a cease and desist. One was the formal IRS disclosure. A third filing went simultaneously to the Vermont State Assessor's office. I sat at my desk at the Whitfield Library and watched my phone. 5:14, missed call, Mom. 5:17, missed call, Mom. 5:23, missed call, Dad. 5:38, missed call, Vanessa. 5:41, text from Mom. What is this? 5:42, Danielle please. 5:44, call your mother. 6:01. Voicemail. Her voice cracking at the seams. 6:18. Voicemail. The crack gone, replaced by something harder. 7 attempts in 76 minutes. I picked up my phone and typed one message to Nathan. See you Saturday at 3:30. Then I locked the rare book room, walked to my car, and drove home through the dark. If you've ever sat at a desk and watched a phone light up with the names of people who always assumed you'd answer, and felt, for the first time, the quiet click of choosing not to, drop the word click in the comments. That's the sound of a boundary being set for the very first time. Saturday. I put on dark jeans, boots, Cordelia's cardigan, and on the dresser, Cordelia's pearls. Ivory toned. Slightly irregular. A small gold clasp engraved with the letter C. The only piece of jewelry she kept when she sold the goldsmith business in 1981. I hadn't worn them since her funeral. I set them around my neck and looked in the mirror. Ivy appeared in the doorway in the navy dress she'd worn to Cordelia's memorial. My oversized cardigan draped over her narrow shoulders like a shawl. Honey, some difficult things will be said today. You don't have to come. She thought about it for 5 seconds, staring at the closet door. I want to come. Are you sure? Cordelia would have come. I smiled for the first time in 11 days. Cordelia would have come in pearls. Ivy looked at my neck. Mom, you look like great-gran. Good. Vanessa's house in Bennington. 14 cars in the driveway. White streamers on the mailbox. A hand-lettered sign on the front door, welcome to movie night. Through the front window, champagne flutes on a silver tray. A banner in Vanessa's handwriting. The Reeves Family Theater, grand opening. 28 guests. The retired school teacher from next door. The hardware store owners from Main Street. My mother's church friends. Pastor Mike. 4 of Brent's co-workers in their Friday polos. Vanessa's mom group friends. And through the French doors at the far end of the living room, a screen the size of a barn door. 6 leather recliners, still wrapped in plastic on the armrests. And in the corner, humming with mechanical cheerfulness, a red and yellow popcorn machine. Tyler and Dylan were already planted in their recliners, holding paper bags, utterly unaware of what was coming. Nathan arrived at 3:46, 1 minute late, carrying a leather briefcase with a brass clasp. We walked up the front path side by side. Brent opened the screen door with a wide grin that collapsed the moment he registered the suit and the briefcase. Hey, Danny. Glad you came around. I haven't, Brent. He blinked. Who's the suit? Nathan Pell. Counsel to the Cordelia Boyd Heritage Library Foundation. May I speak with Mr. and Mrs. Boyd? Brent's smile folded like a napkin. My mother appeared from the kitchen, drying her hands on a dish towel. She saw Nathan. She saw me. She saw Cordelia's pearls around my neck. And something behind her eyes shifted. Danielle, please don't do this here. Mom, you canceled the wrong thing. The party isn't the problem. 8 years of pretending Cordelia's wishes were optional. That was the problem. Vanessa, from behind her mother, she was an old woman with too many books. The room turned 30 faces. I kept my voice low. Could everyone come into the living room, please? There's a document I'd like to read aloud. It will take 4 minutes. And then I'll leave. 30 people in a living room. Pressed against walls. Perched on couch arms. Standing in doorways with champagne flutes they'd stopped drinking from. Through the French doors behind them. The screen, the recliners, the humming popcorn machine. Tyler and Dylan had wandered out of the theater and were standing next to Vanessa, holding their popcorn bags, confused and quiet. I held the deed. 22 pages. Foundation seal embossed on page 1. My hands were not shaking. My name is Danielle Boyd. Most of you know me. I'm Margaret and Richard's older daughter. I'm Ivy's mother. I paused. 11 days ago, my parents sold a rare book collection from the east wing of the family house. They sold it for $165,000 and used the proceeds to build what you see through those doors. They believed those books belonged to them. I looked up. They did not. I'm going to read the document that explains why. It has been a public record at the Vermont Secretary of State's office since January 2010. I turn to page 14. This section is titled, Recapture. I read it the way I read everything at work. Clearly, evenly, without emphasis, letting the language carry its own weight. Any unauthorized disposition of the collection by any party other than the named beneficiary shall constitute a recapture event under applicable federal and state tax law, triggering full-back tax assessment for all years of conditional exemption from 2010 forward, with statutory interest and a 75% penalty. I looked up from the page. My parents sold 217 items last Tuesday for $165,000. Mr. Pell has 15 copies of this deed in his briefcase. The room did not move. Vanessa broke first. This is insane. She is ruining my children's party over a pile of old books. Ivy was standing beside me. Her hand rested on the strap of her backpack. She looked at Vanessa and spoke, clearly, without raising her voice, without rehearsal, because I had not coached her, had not asked her to say a single word. Aunt Vanessa, you didn't buy the theater. A beat. My books did. The room held its breath. I could hear the popcorn machine cycling through the French doors. Tyler, sitting on the arm of the couch with his paper bag, looked at his mother. Mom. Vanessa said nothing. I placed my hand on Ivy's shoulder. She didn't flinch. She didn't step back. She stood exactly where she was. I turned to the room. Tyler and Dylan didn't do anything wrong. They are not part of what comes next. Then I turned to my mother. She was pressed against the far wall, holding a blue ceramic coffee mug with both hands. The same one she'd had since I was in high school. I kept my voice nearly to a whisper. The rest of the room leaned forward. Mom. She looked at me. The collection was never yours to sell. I said it the way Cordelia taught me to handle fragile things. Softly, without emphasis. Every book in that collection was on permanent loan from a tax-exempt foundation. The conditional exemption on the family house was contingent on those books remaining in the East Wing Library, unsold, until passed to Ivy. By selling them, you triggered a recapture event covering every year of exemption from 2010 through today. I looked at her steadily. As of Friday at 5 o'clock, you and Dad owe approximately $412,000 in back taxes, statutory interest, and penalty. You lose the conditional exemption on the house going forward. The town assessor will issue revised property tax notices within 30 days, at full market rate. Roughly $30,000 a year. I held her gaze. The exemption existed because the books were there. The books are no longer there. The house is no longer exempt. My mother's coffee mug slipped from her right hand. It hit the rug without breaking. Coffee spread in a dark oval across the beige carpet. She didn't look at it. She was staring at me with her mouth slightly open. The way you stare at a document that says something you were counting on never being written down. My father sat down slowly on the arm of the couch, as though his knees had arrived at a conclusion before the rest of him. Then my mother's voice climbed. You sold us out to strangers, for old books, for a dead woman. Danielle, she is dead. Why are you destroying this family for a dead woman? Her voice filled the living room, bounced off the ceiling, off the home theater banner, off the champagne flutes no one was touching. 3 of the neighbors were holding their phones at waist level. I don't know if they were recording. I hope they were. Because what I said next was the truest thing I have ever said to my mother. And I wanted someone besides me to remember it. I looked at her. And I said, very quietly, I'm not doing it for the dead one. I looked down at Ivy. I'm doing it for the living one standing next to me. Ivy did not speak. She didn't need to. She was already the answer to every question my mother was too afraid to ask. Nathan opened the briefcase and placed 15 copies of the deed on the coffee table beside the untouched champagne. 3 neighbors picked one up. 2 of my mother's church friends took one. Pastor Mike took 2. I spoke to the room one final time. I'm sorry you had to be here for this. The party is over. Then I turned to Vanessa. The home theater was purchased with proceeds from the sale of foundation property. Nathan will be in contact about restitution. Tyler and Dylan may keep the popcorn machine. The screen and audio system will be returned for credit toward what's owed. Vanessa opened her mouth. Nathan said evenly, Mrs. Reeves, the proceeds are fully traceable. We have the bank records. I looked at my mother one last time. Still against the wall. The coffee stain spreading on the rug at her feet. Mom, the IRS lien hits the house within 60 days. Between the back taxes and the new assessment, you won't be able to keep it. I'd start looking at options now. Evelyn and I will help with the logistics if you want. Or I'll step back entirely. That's up to you. She said nothing. I took Ivy's hand. We walked out the front door, down the 3 porch steps, across the lawn to the car. Nathan followed. The afternoon sun was still high and warm. On the porch, Ivy looked up at me. That was the quietest fight I've ever seen. I looked down at her. Those are the only ones worth winning, honey. 21 days later, Howerin shipped the collection back in 11 archival crates. Climate controlled. Fully insured. Evelyn and I met the truck at the family house. Nathan held the chain of custody forms. 2 conservators from the Whitfield Library helped with the unpacking. 6 hours of careful reshelving. Ivy placed each book herself, starting with the Kelmscott Chaucer, working shelf by shelf, checking every bookplate against the inventory list. She saved the green leather wind in the Willows for last. She carried it with both hands to the south wall. 3rd shelf. Slid it into place. Then she walked to the mahogany reading chair by the window. Sat down. Her feet still didn't touch the floor. She opened the front cover. Found the inscription. Traced the handwriting with her finger. For Ivy, who will keep them safe. And began to read. The room smelled like paper again. 6 months later, the Foundation Board voted to relocate the entire collection to a dedicated climate-controlled wing at the Whitfield Research Library. Ivy retained full beneficiary access. Evelyn named the wing the Ivy Boyd Reading Room. The mahogany chair came with the books. It sits by the east window now, where the morning light is gentler. My parents sold the family house at auction. After the IRS lien was satisfied, they netted enough to buy a 2-bedroom condo in Bennington. My mother has not contacted me. My father sends a card on the 1st of every month. I read them. I have not written back. Maybe in a year. Maybe 2. Maybe never. That's allowed. Vanessa and Brent returned the theater equipment for store credit. They kept the popcorn machine. We don't speak. Ivy is back at silent reading hour. Every Saturday morning in the Ivy Boyd Reading Room, she sits in the mahogany chair that traveled with the books. Feet still not touching the floor. Tracing the bookplate before she starts. The same ritual. The same chair. The same words. For Ivy, who will keep them safe. Setting a boundary with the people who raised you doesn't mean you stopped loving them. It means you finally learned how to love the people they were trying to take from instead. 217 books. 1 10-year-old. And a 4-minute reading in a living room full of people who came for a party and left with a copy of the deed. If this story reminded you that quiet protection is louder than any argument, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And by the way, where are you watching this from? Drop your city or country in the comments, because it genuinely amazes me how far these stories travel around the world. Subscribe so the next one finds you. I'll see you there.